To the extent that we live our lives in a manner that is consistent with the truth in our heart, we thrive.
Welcome to the Meier Clinics Podcast, and you just heard a quote from one of your hosts, Dr. Lisa Day. Join our licensed clinical professionals from various backgrounds as they discuss fascinating mental health topics with a wide range of guests. Meier Clinics is a Christian counseling organization with multiple clinics nationwide dedicated to treating the whole person, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Welcome to our listening family. We thank you for joining us. All right, I am so excited that we have Dr. Antipas Harris with us again on the show. Good morning.
Good morning. It's such a delight to be here again, Kristin.
Absolutely. Oh, of course. I'm so glad that you could do it. And one of my all-time favorite people on this planet, Dr. Paul Meier. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Kristin, and hi, Antipas. We've been, Kristin and I have been doing podcasts together for a number of years now. And so
yeah.
And then we chat before and after, and
right.
Sort of, solve each other's. Well, we listen to each other's problems. We don't really solve them.
Right. We try.
Yeah.
You know what I find interesting, Paul? I don't know if you know this, but your Meier Clinics podcast since COVID has quadrupled in terms of listeners. And a lot of the shows are ones that we already did on my show that we're rendering for the Meier Clinics. I just think it's funny. No one else on the network has had that kind of growth during COVID other than your podcast, which I think is so interesting.
Well, I'm happy that's happening.
People
I think maybe COVID. I know I've got 300 patients that I follow, and I just see them 15 minutes each, so it's easy to do that.
Right.
I see them every 3 months. So I've seen all of them in the last, during the COVID pandemic, and I've been shocked at how few of them worry very much about the disease. Some of them do, but most of them, the ones that are worried about our culture and well, some of them are worried because they're staying at home with their husbands all day every day too, but
right.
But most of them are doing amazingly well. But I think it forces people to think about what life's about. It sort of shakes you up and makes you stop and think about what's about.
Yeah, that was something that we talked about. Antipas and I talked about on the show that we did was, your book you wrote. It was a couple of years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, my book, I started writing it a couple of years ago, and it came out just a month ago. So. Yeah,
and one of the things we said was, did you have any idea that at the time you're writing it, that would end up being it would fit so perfectly with what is going on now? And and no, in hindsight, you don't know those things. That's God in action. But what I wanted to ask some questions today around kind of a follow-up to what we talked about. The book, of course, Antipas, will you go ahead and share the name of the book so everybody can get refreshed?
Yes, the name of the book is Christianity the White Man's Religion? How the Bible is Good News for People of Color.
That title alone right now with everything that's going on is huge. And Paul, I wanted to get your, when I first...
And Kristin,
yeah.
Antipas also wrote a couple of books on social justice.
I know, many. He's got a library out there, yes. Paul does his research, yes.
I can tell.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because, we are having uncomfortable discussions that need to be had, and people got out of the habit maybe of, you have to keep the conversations going. You don't, something like racism, you don't just solve, oh, okay, well, we did this in the 60s, now we're done. It doesn't work that way. It's something you have to continue doing and fine tuning and so on. And what I thought was interesting was I had Bianca McCall on. She's a former WNBA player, and she is one of our podcasters, and she's an African-American woman. And she asked several of my colleagues, all white women, asked them, do you believe that there's a part of you that is racist? And without even thinking, I said, absolutely. And same with them. And what I find challenging is when people absolutely are adamant that they're not in any way, shape, or form in the corners of their psyche. Like you and I, Paul, have done shows about dreams and things that come out in your dreams and how much is in our subconscious. Of course it's there. Why it's so hard for people to accept that, especially in the world of Christianity. So I want to go to you, Antipas, first and say, what's your reaction to me making that statement?
Well, I think as I was hearing you talk, we live in such an individualistic society that's greatly impacted by the Enlightenment. I think therefore I am. This idea, it enshrined into our religious thought, it enshrined into the way we, capitalism is enshrined everywhere. So when we talk about racism, immediately people think of an individual attack. Am I racist? No, I am not. Yes, they are. Yes, you are as an individual. And there are people who adopt to that, to racist ideas and adapt to those ideas and perpetuate them. But I think the deeper concern is a structural and systemic one. And as a structural and systemic problem, society is a victim of racism. And we all live in a society that's a victim of racism. So in many ways, we all are victims of it in different ways, whether we're privileged victims or underprivileged victims. And usually the ones who are underprivileged are the ones who feel the brunt of it. People who are privileged by it are equally victims. And sometimes when something works for you, it's hard for you to see that you're a victim of it.
Yeah, so true.
So I think this idea of are you a racist? It turns into a personal discussion.
So you end up feeling that need to defend yourself before you even listen to what someone is really asking. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yes. Or defend oneself, or say, I am overcoming. I have love in my heart now. I'm going to be nice to Black people. And police are still shooting, but it's still shooting Black people, and people there's still educational problems. All the while, we have white people who are trying to distance themselves from being labeled as racist. By doing nice things. When I go running sometime, there are whites who look at me and just smile, and I'm thinking, oh, that's so nice. But they want me to know that I'm not racist. And I appreciate that. But that's not the issue. That's not the problem that people are out there marching about. They're marching about a systemic problem that is embodied in business and education and policing and criminal justice. And this is a societal problem that dates so far back that it's hard to wrap your arms around it. And
before any of us were born, including Paul.
Right. There's a book, let me mention this before we move on. There's a book called Moral Man in Immoral Society, written by Niebuhr, where he's saying you can be a moral person in an immoral society. And that's the problem with many Christians. We're busy being a moral person in an immoral society. And it's working for us, all the while we're walking by the person who is stripped, beaten and left half dead on the side of the road. A reference to Jesus' story of the Samaritan. we're moral. We're doing the right thing for ourselves, but not for society.
Paul, your thoughts?
Well, on a positive note, like in America, there, in the world, there was and is a lot of racism. But one thing I'm proud of as an American is that as we become more and more aware, I believe America is making progress, and I believe as people we're making progress. I know as a person, I don't want to be racist at all. I mean, it's a sin, and I don't want to be an immoral person at all. And yet there's times when little subtle thoughts, maybe unconscious, that become conscious or something pop up. And my wife and I were just chatting about that last night. With all that's going on in Kenosha and everything else, and as God makes me aware of things, then I take them to Him. And in fact, I think the book title, one of the books that you've written, is The Holy Spirit and Social Justice. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Yeah. And the Holy Spirit helps us to be less racist, just like He helps us to be less selfish and less lustful and less. He's not helping me much with my weight, but because I'm not letting him. So
ongoing problem for Paul and I. Yes.
But racism is something that's in every race. I mean, there's black people who are racist, and Indian people that are racist, and Asian people that are racist, and white people that are racist, and so it's a sin. It can be a sin in all humans, but of course it's the black people that have been most abused, and I guess the Jews have been the most prejudiced against and abused throughout history.
And the least abused have been people who are white. So it's
right.
It can get very comfortable, like you pointed out, Antipas, too. Well, this is working for me.
Yeah.
So I don't have to go look at these other things.
But even that point, when you say whites have been the least abused, right? You have to even qualify. That's a communal statement, because there are individuals who have been white people who have been more abused than me as an individual.
Right.
Right.
And so most of the time, these conversations get relegated to a back and forth about, well, I was raped as a kid and I'm white, or I had this situation. And I don't want to cast shadow on anybody's pain, because we're not in a marathon for who has the worst pain, right?
Right.
We have to affirm all pain as equally terrible and all abuse as terrible. And we advocate for individuals as well as collective society, black or white. But to your point, as a collective, the European over the last 400 or 500 years has been the oppressor in society as a collective. And I say that more systemically than anything these days, because again, there are all kind of abuse that happens within the European context, and we should. And I want to be careful that I'm not overshadowing people,
or overgeneralizing.
Yeah.
It's for me, what I've felt is in younger years, it was much easier to say exactly what I was thinking when it came to something like racism. Over the last maybe 5 years, I found it less and less comfortable to say what I really think about things. I feel like there's such a PC police, or there has been, or maybe it was just me on my own. I don't know. I'm not blaming this on anybody else, but I have felt had more trepidation about speaking my mind on this topic. Mm-hmm. And I don't quite know where that came from. So, but I feel now, not that you want anything horrible to happen to get to this place where you feel, okay, now I can say what I need to say. But I do feel like the the gag over my mouth is gone, and that I do appreciate. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Because you have to have a voice. You can't say, well, you're this other thing, and so you need to be quiet about everything because you are more privileged. Or you can't take, in mental health, it is so much, in my experience of what I've gone through in life, and then speaking about mental health, it is about sharing your voice. So to feel like there's a piece of you that you have to put a gag order on can be very difficult, and it's not very inspiring, and it actually prohibits your own growth, your own soul excavation.
You see, I think that's a problem in society, because that's why I open up by saying this is all of our problem. This is not the Black people's problem.
Right.
This is everybody needs a voice because it's everybody's problem.
Right.
And even if we weren't co-citizens in the same nation, people around the world share it as a human problem. This is not a civil rights problem. This is a human rights problem. So we speaking up for people, and even people within who I mean, if you look at Black Lives Matter movement, recent protests, in some places there are more white people than there are Blacks, just by their numbers. I mean, we're 13% of the population, yet this Black-white thing still dominates a lot of the conversation.
I listened last night to a woman in Kenosha. I used to live in Kenosha, and it's such a peaceful town. At least it was, when I lived there 40 years ago. That I used to joke about. They turn the street lights off at 9:30, roll up the street, roll up the sidewalks. A lady whose business got burned down, was crying, and the news commentator asked her, what her thoughts were. She said, "These are not Kenosha people. These are outside people here burning down our stores and tearing them down." And it's like you said, there's probably more white people doing it than there are Black people, and I think a lot of them, it has nothing to do with race. I think there's some people that are fomenting. The protests have to do with race, and protests are good, for people to protest. But when it comes to the writing, a lot of it is done by outside agitators that are paid to do it.
A lot of it is done by outside agitators who want to cast shadow on the movement, and they know that if they make Black people look destructive, it will dismiss.
I think it foments discord. Most Black people, I know most Black people are against that sort of thing, and the polls even show that most Black people want a strong police presence, and don't want to defund police and things like that. It's like 20% that want that, and 80% that don't. And so it's sad to me that this hurts Black people because of what white people are doing to foment.
No, it's a mixed bag now. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
There is a lot of outside agitators, and many of them are white supremacists and KKK, because I know people on the ground who has identified all this. White.
I don't think they're white supremacists and KKK. I think they're people that want the destruction of America, and they want communism and things of that nature.
No, they're white. The guy who went out there the other day, who shot the protesters, the 17-year-old.
Yeah.
Oh, he was a white supremacist. He is a white supremacist.
Yeah. There's some of those too.
Yeah. In Charlottesville, the guy who ran into the crowd in that car, that was a white supremacist. Up in Minnesota, a lot of the initiating of conflict were white supremacists. The white people who were on the ground who told me said, no, it was white supremacists and Hell's Angels who were doing a lot of that. A pastor who I know was out there said, no, it really was white supremacists, KKK people. Now, that's one thing. The other thing is that Black people are sick of this. I mean, this shooting, and, you can only be nice for so long.
Right.
That there are Black people who are burning down stuff because they are not being heard. And there is a force of racism that we're sick of. And we're sick of also hearing people say, oh, rioting is bad. Well, what do you want us to do? Right. I mean, these guys keep getting shot. It's like, you know what I mean? Saying we shall overcome again, like the 1960s. At some point, we're tired of this cycle. And we're seeing even the NBA now, which I fully support, has decided they're not playing. Black people can't keep being the white world's entertainment and told to be quiet and be peaceful while we get shot up and don't get the jobs and get cheated on jobs. I mean, there is empirical evidence, and the situation of this police violence is not isolated. This is a history of this. Right. Policing in America was born out of slave patrol. And there was never a time in this country where we paused and lamented about the horrible history. No, the people who want to preserve the country and demonize Black Lives Matter and all that are people who are also preserving racism and saying there is no systemic racism. And there is systemic racism.
That's the part that you're talking about, that you talked about earlier, where if it's not affecting someone, they can say, oh, it's, to me, I call it flame throwing the truth, flame throwing lies, not the truth. There's so much microaggression, and then there's obviously a lot bigger than that. And if it's not happening to you, it's so much easier to say that's not really happening. There's something so important of witnessing it for yourself. Don't read it on whatever news is feeding you. Go there, see what's happening, talk to someone face to face, go to a protest, see what's actually happening, listen to people. We can't, you're too many layers removed when you sit back and you're just getting your information on wherever you choose to get your news from. Does that make sense?
Right. And the idea that Black people are sitting around watching CNN and determining what it is we believe is absolutely insane.
Exactly.
Like, we live this.
Exactly.
I don't need to, half the time I don't even want the TV on because I can tell them what's happening. I live this. I've been on the street. That's right. I know what this life is like. I know what the challenges are. I know stories and people and statistics and data and so forth. So the reality is that in white America, there is a pervasive intentionality to control the narrative and to suggest that Black people are pawns in liberals' hands, as if we have no brain.
Exactly.
Well, that's why we say Black Lives Matter, because it's this assumption that we don't have a brain and don't know what we're talking about, and we're being fed by some liberal whatever. We don't need to be part of a party system to know what it's like to be Black in America.
Right. Excellent. Exactly. And I like that feeling of being uncomfortable because I'm in mental health, because I've gone to therapy, because that's what you do. You excavate, you look at your trauma, but that's a very small population of people that learn how to get comfortable with their uncomfortableness. The rest of society, most of it, doesn't like that at all and want to avoid it. But if you look at how much trauma, generational trauma, do Black Americans have they gone through? Do they continue to go through? So I always think when I'm talking to a therapist about these kind of things, well, wait a minute, you can't just judge someone for the behavior that they did yesterday. How many microaggressions have gone on through the history of time that got them to this point? Like, how many times do you have to yell to get someone to hear you? And then when you yell loud enough, people go, what's your problem? You are the problem. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you stand there and go, are you kidding me? Did you not see what are you paying attention to? You've missed all these other things. And that's just basic human nature. That's how we I mean, I have situations in my life now where people will go, oh, that really wasn't that bad. Stop complaining. Well, if someone would have told me what was really happening, then I could have done something about it. And I always say, boy, that is so passing the buck. How many people have been screaming at you about what's been going on, and you choose not to see it? Willful blindness. And then when they finally start screaming, then you say, what's wrong with them? They're screaming. It's so unfair. Am I making any sense with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like
Right.
slap somebody and say, shut up, don't cry. It's like, because crying is bad.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like, well, this all started with the slap, not with the cry, And that's what I'm saying with the whole rioting thing. People rush to the rioting. It's like, listen, this didn't start with the rioting. This started with policing in America. That the people who are blaming the people who are rioting, now there are people who are trying to frame this narrative, but things are not neat. There are people who are frustrated and doing frustrated things. And if we start with the looting and the rioting and double down on demonizing Black America to delegitimize the pain and to suggest that somehow this is a violent liberal takeover anarchy, then we're missing the point. It didn't start with the cry. It started with the slap.
Exactly. Right. And the slap over, not just the slap today.
It's slap.
The slap from generation upon generation. Exactly. Your mother slap, your father slap, their parents slap, and it goes back and back.
And the guy across town got slapped, and the guy up north got slapped, yes. And the guy down south got slapped. Now I got slapped. I mean, it's just, and the slap is not only policing. I mean, it's poverty, it's
opportunity.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and you always have to. I always try to find a tether of what I can understand out of things. That's human nature as well. So I got really upset the other night. Someone was just coming at me about sexual abuse and sex rings and pedophilia and all this stuff. They were really going at it with me about that, and it was very shallow. It was information they got from the news. And since I have experienced those things myself, I can't get into the shallow of that with somebody. Not because I'm in so much trauma. Believe me, I've done eons worth of therapy of all kinds on it. It's like that slap. It's like, just, you want to know what really goes on there, go to an organization that this is all they do. This is what they're about. Stop hearing about this garbage from somewhere else. And what are you doing about it? Are you volunteering your time and hearing stories from people that have been through it firsthand? Are you there doing work? Are you just bored and you want something to chew on that's you've read on Facebook? That's where I can somewhat understand, these slaps. Does that make sense?
Hi, this is Dr. Paul Meier of the Meier Clinics. Our Christian counselors across the country have a goal of helping all those who come to us to become what God has called them to be. If you're in a situation where you're not at peace within yourself, or you just feel like there's joy that's missing in your life, we can come alongside to help you obtain peace and joy.
This message is sponsored by the Meier Clinic Foundation, a nonprofit Christian counseling ministry. The number is 1-888-7-CLINIC, 1-888-7-CLINIC.
Yeah, the thing is, as long as we are, this is a sports culture, and everybody knows what they should do, what they should have done to win the game last night. I remember growing up, there was a guy who was so into sports, he would literally pick up the television and go set it outside. There are guys that get so much into it and say, "You dumb, you should have done this and do this," and Monday morning back quarterback and then all that. It's always the people who know what should be done who are not in the game.
Exactly.
It's like when you're in the game, you see it differently. And I think what happens is a lot of the leadership in this country, a lot of the people who are commenting on stuff are commenting from the outside looking in.
Yes.
If Black people would just cooperate with the police, that's what Franklin Graham said once. It's such a turnoff to hear that stuff. It's like, you don't know what this is like. And the people who actually get out there and experience some of it or get some kind of level of empathy, their stories always change.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's impossible to actually live into these situations and come out the same way you did when you went in. Because the world always looked different from the outside.
And many of us are more privileged to look from that outside than others. And it's like there's so much stress and trauma going on with just dealing with the pandemic that I know for a lot of people, regardless of skin color, they're like, I can't, it's enough for me to just get through this. I can't also deal with all of that, and yet I have to.
Yeah, it's painful. It's painful.
So,
I was on Ben Carson's campaign committee way back when he was running, and then I was in a small prayer group with him for about a year or two, and here he's the most famous brain surgeon in America that removed half of a brain and everything, but he even a brain surgeon gets stopped sometimes just because he's Black, and and pulled over and things, and things like that. I mean, he shared a lot of things that are still part of society, and but again, I'm proud of what all he's doing to try to help the African American population in particular, and we've got a clinic in Chicago where we do actually a couple $1 million a year of charitable work in the inner cities, and learn a lot from our African American therapists and staff and the clients that we reach out to here in Dallas. I work, firsthand with a gal she was working for $12 an hour up front, and she was so talented and gifted that when our regional director moved on to a different job, she became our regional director, so she's my boss now. and she's just doing an excellent job, and we relate, we share things, and there's things like you just said, Antipas, there's things that as a white person you can't imagine until you hear it, from your friends that are on that live in their skin.
right. So how do you help, like what we had talked about last week, people that say Christianity isn't even here for me, and you're African American? How do you reach that person to say, okay, but let's get back to the core, let's get back to, or whatever it is that you do? How do you go there? And Paul, I want to ask you the same question, but I want to start with you, Antipas.
Well, I think the first thing is we have to affirm the question, right? The temptation is to rush to make a correction or to answer the question, when I just want to understand where the question is coming from. And people come at the questions in their own journey, right? Some people come from, they've been reading about history and they know where, slavery was sanctioned by Christianity. Oh, okay, so now I know how to respond to that question. And then there are those who say, well, I was a part of a church and they act like they didn't care about what was going on in my life. Oh, okay, so this is a local church question. This is a local church issue. Or, people come at it from different ways and different narratives. So I'm a real narrative identity person where our lives are shaped by our narratives. And so I don't want to have a cookie cutter response to a narrative that.
I knew you wouldn't.
Yeah.
That's why I asked a generic question, because I thought he is going to elevate my rudimentary way of asking a question, which is something fan-freaking-tastic.
So I think, you just talked a little bit about, sex abuse and things like that. If a person is coming at it from the standpoint of, I don't believe in Christianity because this pastor or this leader or this person I trusted as a spiritual person abused me sexually. Right. I've run into that. Stuff happens. I've had to deal with those kind of issues that I can't just pick up the Bible and respond to that. Right. You have to enter into the story of their life and ask the Holy Spirit for guidance on how to, one, by God's grace, if I'm able to embody a new revelation about who God is. It really is based on context.
Yes, and you two are in positions where you have to take all of these other things into consideration, where I am not. So sometimes or not as much anyway, sometimes when someone comes at me and I understand that their heart is coming from the right place, but I just don't want to go there because of my own stuff. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a pastor. I can say, I don't want to deal with that. Right. It's too much. I just, please, no. So that's why I have such profound respect for, these kinds of professions where you really do have to leave many of your own belief structures outside that door before people come in to try to, alleviate their pain. And I don't know that I'm capable of doing that, at least not at this point in my life, to the degree anyway that the two of you do. So Paul, what do you say about that? Because you've been counseling people for a long, I know you do the 15-minute checks now, but you have counseled many, I can't even count.
Yeah, I see people in our day hospital every day.
Yeah.
Who come, they come about 7 hours a day, 5 days a week for 3 weeks. So I see them in the mornings, and then I see the medicine checks in the afternoon. So I am talking to people every day and hearing their pain and like I said, we have clients who come here, but half of them are from in-state and half of them come from out of state, and they're of all racial backgrounds, and you learn, when you do that every day, you develop empathy for people's pain, and like even police. I'm going to step outside the politically correct word by saying this, but even police, most cops are good people, and most of them want justice. A lot of them are risking their lives every day to help people, and I know here in Dallas, a majority of the police are African American, and we had a African American chief of police. I think I don't know if the current one is or not, but when those shootings took place, there were police that were laying on the bodies of people to protect them from getting shot. There were some white police laying on the bodies of African Americans to protect them from getting shot, and some of them got shot. And so I also feel sorry for the good police who are getting demonized, like as if they're all bad, they're all racist stuff. When and again, all humans are racist to some extent or another, but they're really getting the brunt of this right now, when so many of them are risking their lives and doing what they can, and now they're being held back. And I know when those shootings took place, Jerry Jones wanted the players themselves wanted to wear armband for one game, to honor the Dallas police who had given their lives to protect other people, and the NFL wouldn't allow them to do it, and that's sad. That's sad.
What was it again?
So
when what happened?
Jerry Jones and the whole team voted to wear armbands honoring the police during the NFL game that followed that incident a number of years ago, where the police there were about 5 Dallas police or more that lost their lives. I've treated some of their families and that lost their lives during some rioting, and the NFL would not allow them to do that. They wouldn't allow them to say anything that would honor any police. And
well, they wouldn't allow them to say anything that honored the black people either who've been killed. Remember? His job as a result of kneeling in protest to what has happened to black people for over 400 years. The difference here is that policing is a job. Black is a life. We live black.
Yeah.
They sign up for that.
Yeah.
And policing, the issue is not police, it's policing. And so policing has been the issue that needs to be reformed, not individual police necessarily. But as you said, there we have overwhelming number of good police. The attack is not on police, it's on policing.
Yeah, some of them feel though like they feel like they're being singled out and it all may be bad.
Black people have felt singled out for 400 years. So I don't really have sympathy for that, because my thing is, if a black person has to match their trauma with somebody who has a job of policing, that's unfair to the life of the black person, because we can't, listen, we can't simply undermine black life in America that was built on racism.
Right.
Put that on par with police, because there is no blue life. There is black life. You put that on and take it off. You can decide to leave it and go the other way. Policing is a problem in America. And if we can't see that, then we're back at the problem again.
Yeah. And there needs to be a lot of work done. For sure.
Agreed. You know what I love about this conversation is I have a little bit of a knot in my stomach. I don't know about the two of you, but it's fascinating to go into something where you don't know everything. Everybody has a different experience. Someone has the direct experience, and yet no one is screaming, no one is yelling, no one is not listening. Everyone is allowed to state respectfully, doing it in a respectful way, their experience, and no one is made to feel stupid. And sometimes when I look at what all this system noise that's out there that is so much a part of the problem, I think, getting back to these kinds of conversations where you can even agree to disagree on something and doing it in a respectful manner, what happened to being able to do that,
Yeah, absolutely. I think the art of the gift of civil discourse and disagreement has gone out of the window in an odd way. We have to be able to express differences of ideas. And I want to be unequivocal. I think we need something like a police. We can't have a society that we don't have. I mean, part of the call for justice is to hold people accountable to a legal system. So we need that. But shooting people because they had a scuffle with the police is just that police.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we got this guy who went out there with that long gun shooting people at the protest, walked right past police. He was 17 with a gun that was illegal. And he got to go home. A black person don't stand a chance like that.
They would be shot dead. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, shot dead. This guy gets home, gets apprehended safely, and he walked right past him as if he knew there was nothing going to happen. And that's the reality. A black person has a gun.
Yeah.
He's a forget, the fact that we have a right to carry weapons. Most of the time, we have to qualify by saying, oh, he was unarmed. Well, technically, he could be armed.
Right.
But when he's black, he has to
Exactly.
be unarmed. I've had bishops and pastors who have called meetings with large numbers of, because I like to shoot. And so he called large groups on after several of the shootings of young men in that community, just pleading with them. I know we have a right to carry weapons, but can you please, for me and for your own life, leave your gun at home?
Right.
I was in those meetings where we had to be held by our own community to a different standard than the standard of the right to carry, because we knew if we show up somewhere with a gun, he was an armed black person, thus he should have gotten shot.
Yeah.
And that is collective pain
That's
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think where we need to get to, and I hope that this is where we're going, is conversations like this where, Antipas, you can go to levels, much more maybe not as careful. You always have to deliver the message to the audience in the way that you think that they're going to hear it. And so you have multiple audiences to go to where they can hear what you're talking about. And just like me, I don't walk into every dinner party and say, let's talk about childhood sexual abuse, because I've done that. And then everybody says, let's not invite her to the next party, because we wanted to talk about drapes. But when there's the passionate you that is with a group of people where you can just say what is in your soul, and this is happening and this is going on. And then you do have to go, okay, that was for that audience. And what I'm going to say over here is for here. And what I think I tried to do anyway with a medium where you just use your voice. There's something so powerful about just listening, not being distracted visually. You really have to listen, is trying to push forward the idea of this respectful conversation and how to have it with different kinds of people. So I appreciate the two of you for, agreeing to do this. We'll never get everything figured out in one conversation, but if any one of us left this with a different viewpoint that we can take back to somebody else that is close to being able to level up, I think then we've done something good together.
What can we do, Antipas? What I don't want to close with us just describing the issue. I'd like to really hear from you, because I know you're right firsthand, at the Potter's House Church and the university and everything there. I mean, you've got firsthand experience of everything that's going on in that regard. And I'd really like to hear from you, and I know our listeners would like to hear from you too. What can we do? What can me and you and Kristin and all the listeners do to help, improve? We're not going to solve the world's problems, until Jesus comes back. But what can we do in the meantime to improve the situation?
First of all, Paul, I really appreciate the question. I think I would like to be friends. I like to go to coffee together. I like to build relationship. Most of the time, we build relationship with people who agree. I think we have to learn to build relationships with people who we don't agree with.
Yes.
I think that we have a better society. I've become a better educated person. I think that we tend to, as a people, run from people who we determine don't fit within our tribe. And I think tribal cross-pollination is absolutely necessary to build a more cohesive society. I would welcome the opportunity to spend time with people, not to convert them. I mean, right? We have this sort of evangelical idea that every time you meet with somebody who's not like you got to convert them. So it's not about conversion. That word is out the window. This is a different kind of relationship. I like to get in the head of people whose experience is very different than mine. Because to be honest with you, I don't understand how people don't see it my way. Because I'm only but you see what I mean? But
Yes.
you all are like that.
Trust me, Paul and I have done shows where he has said that same thing.
You're hearing guilty laughter here.
But you get my point. I'm a little tongue in cheek, but you get my point. Because I keep rehashing the whole thing, and it makes all the sense in the world to me. So I'm like, okay, how is it that you don't see it? Because what we tend to do is stop there and say, therefore, the other person is a evil person. Because anybody sees that will come to this conclusion. So
that's great. You're at the cancel culture. If you don't think the way I do, you're evil.
Right. So I want to get into the head of the other person and try to understand the world through their vision. Can I just say this? And I don't mean to open up another conversation, but I can't understand the people who want to, as a person from Georgia, I cannot understand why people want to preserve federal or Confederate statues when the Confederacy only lasts for 5 years and they lost the war. So I wanted to spend time with somebody who understood that. And I was just all in that conversation, asking questions, trying to understand, how do you figure that this is supposed to be preserved? And I left thinking, you didn't convert me for sure, but at least I understand. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's like, at least I understand the Southern pride. That was an educational experience for me. Now, I hope that it was an exchange, that they also understood my perspective. And that's the educator in me. I'm trying to understand, how can a good person see it that way?
That's a tough question. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Now, this gets even tougher when there are issues of violation of people's bodies and emotions and psyche. There are bad people who see the world differently. So, but right now I'm at a different level of discourse where I'm just talking about just general perspective about things.
Right.
Political perspective about things. Just trying to understand, how do people understand it that way?
What do you think about that, Paul?
Well, I know some good people who see it that way, and don't see it as a racial thing. They see it as more as having to do with taxes and injustice that they felt. That people, from some people, I'm not from the South, but I know some good people from the South who feel like the Civil War wasn't. It was about a lot of different things, and for a lot of them it wasn't as much about race, which of course is an evil thing, a very, very evil thing. But there were other things that were being done to the South by Northern leaders that were unjust, and they were, and so a lot of them were fighting for those types of things rather than for a racial thing, and so the leaders that they had are part of history, and so they still want to honor the people who fought for them for justice in things that had nothing to do with racism. And it's hard. I mean, I had to really, really, really listen to hear that that aspect of people that are definitely not racist, who are, but who don't want the whole history wiped out. So there, I'm just saying that there are some good people that feel that way.
I take a walk.
That it shouldn't be destroyed. It shouldn't be destroyed.
I take a walk every morning with someone who I really like, and we plan when we're up to talking politics because they believe everything the opposite of what I do. And sometimes I think, why am I doing this? And then other times I go, but this is a nice neighbor. This is, they do not go out and do harmful things in the world, even though I think that their belief system is extremely harmful. And so how do you be a neighbor to someone that you just so don't agree with, and yet you have to be their neighbor? They ain't going to move and I'm not going to move. And so somehow we have to coexist in a peaceful way. So that's always interesting too. And boy, they know how I feel. Because I don't hold back, especially now.
I don't either. I'm pretty, as you know, I stick my foot in my mouth lots of times.
Yeah.
I'm thinking out loud. I think out loud, that.
Yeah. Starts in the brain and just tumbles out the tongue. You and I both have that disease.
Yeah. Foot and mouth disease.
Yes. Well, we are at time, but I want to just thank you both for coming on and doing this today. I think it's the beginning of more conversations. I certainly hope. I hope you two have gotten something out of this. I certainly did.
I'd like to have a meal or two with you, Antipas, if you'll allow me that honor. I think that it'd be really great. I would, because I want to learn from your experiences, like I learned from all the people that I interact with daily. And
absolutely, I would absolutely welcome that. I would absolutely welcome that.
Go to his church, Paul. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, yeah, I'd love to do that. I wanted to. My wife told me today. She said, "Be sure to tell," because I told her I was doing a program with you. She said, and my wife's from Mississippi, and she said, "Be sure to tell Antipas that for many, many, many years, the sermons of T.D. Jakes got her through her pain." When she was, we'd just been married for about 13 and a half years, so she went through a lot of pain before that, and some pain after probably too. But yeah.
That would be fantastic.
That is such a nice.
I want to see a picture. You could social distance or as needed, but I definitely, if you guys do that, I want to see a picture of the two of you together. That would be just so awesome.
Let's make that happen, not just by gesture, but actually in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, listeners, thank you for tuning in. We always have these winding conversations. So thanks for being a fly on the wall with us here. I hope it made you maybe look at things, from multiple perspectives and come to a more peaceful conclusion in your own heart. So thanks for tuning in to another episode of Mental Health News Radio. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Tune in next time for another engaging discussion on relevant mental health topics. If you have any questions about Meier Clinics, please visit our website at meierclinics.com. That's MEIER clinics.com, or call us at 888-7-CLINIC. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And please note that we are a member of and produced by Mental Health News Radio Network, MHNRnetwork.com.